Well, there's a new episode of my podcast, Tying It Together with Tim Boym, out now, wherever you listen to your podcast. We have a preview for you right now. This week I talked with my Spectrum News colleague, Errol Louis. He's the host of Inside City Hall on New York One and The Big Deal, which you can see every Friday night right here on Spectrum News 1. Now, one of, if not the biggest race in the country decided last week was the New York City mayoral race. 34-year-old self-proclaimed Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani won, capping off a race that has sparked national conversations about the future of that Democratic Party and politics as a whole. Now, here in North Carolina, we've already seen Mamdani and his politics be used in attacks against former governor and current U.S. Senate candidate Roy Cooper. We talked about that and much more. Here's my conversation with Errol. Even in North Carolina, just this, yesterday or today, we got a press release about our U.S. Senate race comparing Roy Cooper, the Democrat, to Mamdani. So obviously this has become this big national thing, especially with the socialists and whatnot. Let's start from a basic standpoint. I mean, you spent time with him with the debate and interviews. What should North Carolinians and the people around the country know about who this guy is?
Well, the bare bones of his biography actually do kind of tell the story. He is the son of a professor and a filmmaker. He's a very young man. This is the youngest mayor we've had in more than 100 years. And there's only one who's been younger. And that's it for all, 400 years of New York City history. So, yes, we are about to turn over the management of the largest city in the country to someone who has served about 5 years in the state legislature in the lower house, who's, not quite a freshman, but a very young junior assemblyman. The thing I think to know about him is that he was a political organizer. And so there's a generational story that is emerging here where a lot of young people who were maybe involved in Occupy Wall Street, who were involved in a lot of different movements, a lot of urban environmental movements, civil rights movements, labor organizing. A lot of those currents have been sort of bubbling here in New York City, and he was involved in a lot of it as a street organizer. And so, the young people have said collectively, they're just not interested in the political establishment that has failed them over and over and over again. And he was really pretty explicit about that, So there actually are some Trump Mamdani voters.
Wow.
We have identified some. We've interviewed a handful of them, and you can find the geographic areas. And look, it stands to reason. If you are part, for whatever reason, of a group that feels slighted, ignored, disrespected, maybe ripped off economically, and the political establishment keeps telling you, hey, let's just do the same thing one more time, sooner or later, people run out of patience. And so, the same way the election of Donald Trump in 2016 was kind of a primal scream of the sort of the rural working class, the election of Zohran Mamdani is the primal scream of a generation that is sick of being told to wait and that things will suddenly get better if they just work a little bit harder. People who here work very, very hard. They keep crazy hours. Most people who have come to the city came because they were very ambitious and really wanted to make it in the arts or in finance or in whatever their chosen field is. And we have collectively not opened enough doors for them.
So do you think it's more about a movement and a youth movement than it is about this whole democratic socialism then? It's more about him and not necessarily exactly what he wants to do?
Well, there are three tributaries. I started by telling you about sort of the biggest one that I think is the most meaningful one, but there are two others. One is in our city of immigrants, and about 40% of the people in New York City were born outside of this country. But there are some immigrant groups that have not traditionally had a lot of prominence in the political leadership. And we call them South Asians, but it's really a number of different countries, Indians, Pakistanis, people from Bangladesh, people from Nepal, people from Sri Lanka. There are a lot of them here. There are like a lot. And they have not traditionally been seen in a lot of ways. They haven't been organized. You certainly find a lot of them toiling away in the hospitals or as orderlies, as security guards, maybe sweeping the sidewalk, maybe taking care of people's kids as a nanny, but driving cabs for sure. But nobody ever reached out and really tried to organize them. And Mamdani did that. And that's one important base. And then there are the Democratic Socialists of America. But look, for perspective's sake, there are 8 million people who live, 8+ million people who live in New York City. There are just under 5 million who are registered to vote. The total membership of the Democratic Socialists of America, their New York chapter, has maybe 13,000 people. And I think it doubled or tripled as Mamdani was sort of gathering steam. So it's not a commanding movement. It's not the norm. It's outnumbered by any number of large democratic organizations or labor unions. Vastly outnumber them. But they have been focused, and they're the ones who have really led the charge in a lot of ways strategically on this question I've been talking about. The young people who lived through the mortgage meltdown in 2008, who brought Occupy Wall Street down to basically to the foot of Wall Street and said, enough of this economy is not working for us, who have lived through a lot of the Iraq war and the Afghanistan debacle. They've just seen our institutions fail them over and over and over again. And now we're in a city where the average rent in Manhattan, the median rent, meaning half above, half below, for even like a 1 or 2 bedroom is $5,000 a month.
That's crazy.
And so they're saying you can't have average rent of $60,000 a year when the average wage is something like 75,000. Like it's not like you can tinker with it. You have to really just fundamentally rework it, is really what they've been saying.
Remember, you can catch the new episode of Tying It Together with Tim Boehm right now. A new episode drops every single Wednesday in the Tying It Together YouTube channel, wherever you listen to your podcast. Time for our first break. Coming up, we'll talk with an expert about the potential impact of Mamdani's election on politics here in North Carolina. Stay with us. Welcome back to Capitol Time. I'm Tim Boehm. Tonight we're taking a look at the election of New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani, the impact it's having on races nationwide, including right here in North Carolina. Joining us now for more, political professor and friend of the program, Dr. Chris Cooper of Western Carolina University. By the way, if you were listening a little earlier, we had my colleague Errol Louis from New York City on. He's interviewed Mamdani several times, and we were talking about this, Chris, about whether or not, it's hard to believe this, he could have an impact on this race. But just a day after he won that election, the National Republican Party sent out a release and said that he and Governor Cooper, who's running for U.S. Senate, are peas in a pod, and any attempt by Cooper to separate himself from Mamdani should not be taken seriously. Should that be taken seriously, Chris?
No, I think that should be taken as a smart political play. I'd be disappointed if they didn't do that, right? It's exactly what a smart political professional would do. But no, I mean, I find it hard to believe that Roy Cooper and Mamdani have probably ever met each other, probably ever spent any time together. They're very different people. But if you're the Republican Party, this has got to be the strategy, right? The strategy is nationalize Mamdani, nationalize Mamdani, nationalize Mamdani. Make sure he is the face of the Republican Party everywhere from New York City to Boise, Idaho to Garner, North Carolina.
Can it work in some places, though? I mean, I find Cooper a little bit different because he's been in office since the 80s. Granted, we got a lot of new people to the state, but he's harder to define in that way on what to a lot of people probably seem like a left turn.
Yeah, I think so. Look, he is, as well established a figure as you have in modern North Carolina politics. It's going to be tough to be able to really tar him with that and have it stick to any degree. But at the same time, look, what else do the Republican Party want to do here? They want to tarnish the Democratic Party's brand. And I think that's where maybe they can have a little bit more success. So even if they're not able to portray Roy Cooper as being somebody who is, tied with Mamdani, could they tie the Democratic Party to that, the Democratic Party national brand to that? I think they're more likely to get some success doing that.
I do think the Democratic National Party brand in this is interesting. This democratic socialism. Republicans did really well with the defund the police, sort of demonizing that for better or for worse, and using that against Democrats. this democratic socialism thing, I think, spurs a lot of people back to the 80s and, and the Cold War and all that kind of stuff as well. How do you think Democrats handle this moving forward? Because Mamdani does have quite a bit of momentum and a lot of young voters.
He does. He does have those things. And let's be real clear. He has those things in New York City, right? Sure. That is as unique a place as there is in American politics. So, the Democratic Party does have to do a little bit of a tightrope, and they've been doing it so far. You don't see a lot of Democratic politicians giving full-throated endorsements to Mamdani, except who? AOC and Bernie Sanders, right? Those are the kinds of folks who are going all in on Mamdani. The Roy Coopers of the world, the Raphael Warnocks of the world, the Andy Bashirs of the world, they have been remarkably quiet about this. I think the Democrats want less nationalization of Mamdani as a figure. The Republicans want more nationalization of Mamdani as a figure.
This is just another example, too, right, of national politics infiltrating down. I mean, in some ways, not Mamdani necessarily, but it's whatever is, maybe it will be him versus Trump in North Carolina, not necessarily Cooper versus Whatley, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, I think that's what we're going to see. I would be shocked if I don't get flyers in my mailbox in Sylva, North Carolina, that has a picture of Mamdani, right? Not running here, not ever going to run anywhere near here, but that's not the point, right? The point is to take the Democratic Party brand down a notch. Mamdani makes this argument, hey, I'm a Democrat for my party affiliation. I'm a democratic socialist for my ideology. That just sounds like an awful lot of wonkery, I think, for the average American, and that's what the Republicans are going to try to reinforce.
Yeah. The Helene recovery is one thing that I think will be very North Carolina focused. That will be a big part in that Senate race as well. What did you make of the results from election night and the impact it may or may not have, or the crystal ball of what it may or may not tell us about next year? Is this just pundits again taking too much stock, or is it something?
I mean, it's something, it's meaningful in that these are real elections with real consequences and real outcomes. So I think if pundits and everybody else weren't watching them, they wouldn't be doing their job. At the same time, it's not the case that we can just copy and paste 2025 into 2026. So if we look at state of North Carolina, for example, we say, all right, it seemed like the progressive candidates did better by and large than the less progressive candidates across the state, even in the nonpartisan elections. Let's remember, only half the state even had a single item or person or seat on their ballot. Who had those items, people and seats on their ballot? People who live in municipalities, people who are increasingly, capital D, Democrats who are more left-leaning. So it's going to be a very, very different electorate in North Carolina in 2026 than it was in 2025.
So if we had to put, a bet on it today, Democrats probably pick up a few seats in the legislature in each chamber?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. The Senate's going to be tougher. Those Senate maps are very, very hard to move. The House maps are hard to move, but there's a few places where the Democrats can get some inroads. So I think that's right. I think the Democrats have got to be hoping to pick up a few seats in the General Assembly. I doubt that they realistically think they can get a majority. I think that would be not just a blue wave, but a blue tidal wave, the likes of which we're just not going to see given these maps.
And just to remind our viewers, from a congressional perspective, with this new map, we may have this many competitive races, right?
On paper, we do have that many competitive elections, right? So the only toss-up seat in North Carolina and in the entire United States Southeast was North Carolina's 1st congressional district. Well, guess what? The redistricting we talked about just a couple of weeks ago took care of that. We now have a big goose egg number of true toss-ups in the entire United States Southeast.
Crazy. Crazy. For better, for worse. No, that's not saying anything about either side on that. It's just wild. Before I let you go, obviously there's this, the shutdown situation is resolving finally. Do you think there's any winners or losers in this? I know there's this view that Democrats kind of gave in. It kind of seems like in a couple months no one will remember this, but it does sort of put the onus on Republicans on the healthcare situation if that continues to go sour, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So the Republicans said, hey, we're going to have a hearing on these ACA subsidy extensions. We'll see if they follow through. If they don't, I think that could be really tough for a lot of Republican candidates going forward. As far as the Democrats, I think it's very telling, right? There were 8 Democrats, I believe, who broke in the United States Senate. Not a single one of them has an election in 2026. I do not think that is an accident. I do not think that is a coincidence. I think that is strategy.
Strategy and not policy and politics, Chris? Come on.
Yeah, I know. It's shocking, Tim.
Good to see you, my friend. Thank you. If you want to keep up with what's happening in North Carolina politics and hear more conversations with people shaping our state and beyond, check out the Tying It Together YouTube channel in the description. Hit subscribe and let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, elections, and issues that matter to you.